My name is Bao Ha. I am here at Rcvr Armory in Mebane, North Carolina. I'm one of the apprentice gunsmiths here, and today we are here to swap the barrel out on this Foxtrot mic forward charging upper from a 16-inch barrel to a 20-inch barrel, which we'll then install on this SRU bullpup kit. So this is a Faxon gunner profile 20-inch barrel. The reason we're going with this is because in a bullpup kit, you've moved all of the action and internals of the gun much further back towards your shoulder, which also means that you can have a much longer barrel while having the overall length of the gun still be nice, short, and manageable. A traditional, say, M16 is a pretty unwieldy gun. It's well over 30 inches. If you have a fixed stock, it's almost 44 inches if I remember, with a 20-inch barrel. If you have a collapsible stock, it's a little bit shorter. If you're using a bullpup kit, then that moves all of the action from being right here, right in front of the trigger, to well behind by, I'd say, about just over a foot. And that means that you have that much more room to be able to use a longer barrel while keeping the overall length of the gun nice and short, to be a lot easier to manipulate in close quarters. Alright, so first thing we're going to do on this barrel swap is take off the handguard. We just don't have to mess with it. We're not going to be worried about scratching it or anything. Go ahead and pull it off and show you. The only thing holding on the handguard is these two Torx screws. They're machine screws. They are a size T27. So we'll go ahead and pop this back on this tool, which is just here to hold the barrel in place so that as you're wrenching on the gun, you're not torquing the much thinner, much more fragile aluminum upper receiver. The barrel is thick, made of steel. If you're going to be doing anything with the barrel or the muzzle device, you don't want to have torque applied to the upper receiver because that will absolutely bend or break before the barrel will. So let's go ahead and get this handguard off. Okay, put the screws down there. And this just slides right off. Now, as I was saying earlier, this is a Foxtrot mic forward charging handguard slash receiver. This was bought as a full upper receiver, complete upper receiver. And then like a lot of other companies, when it comes to Foxtrot mic and their forward charging systems, this one happens to also be bufferless. When they say complete upper receiver, they mean that it has barrel charging handle, because the charging handle is, as you can see, a part of the rail, as well as the bolt. A lot of other companies will say that they're selling complete upper receivers, but they won't include the bolt or charging handle. In this case, because these are proprietary, as you can see, this is a much shorter bolt than on a traditional Aero 15. You have to have that shipped with the upper receiver. And of course, if you buy a full FM15, which is their bufferless forward charging full rifle, they will include all this as well. The next step is going to be taking off the muzzle device. So we'll go ahead and just use a big crescent wrench. I've taped off the muzzle device because you don't want to put metal on metal necessarily if you care at all about the aesthetics of the gun. Unless you're going for a battle hardened look, which I don't really think we are. You want to cover it with something. Paper towels can work, rags can work, but the biggest issue with those is that I've seen and I have done is that if you're wrenching on it pretty hard, you can eat straight through that cloth if you're not careful, and there's a lot of volume there that you're going to have to worry about when you're putting some real torque on it, and you want as little wiggle as possible. So, as I said earlier, this tool is keeping the star chamber supported on the inside of the barrel, so all of the stress is going to the barrel and not to the upper receiver. Alright, feel it break. In 1 second while I try to open up this press wrench, you see it just unscrews off. You can see on the muzzle device there is a little bit of metal peeking through. I'm probably going to go ahead and unwrap and then rewrap this with some tape. Masking tape usually works pretty well. It doesn't leave a lot of residue. That's why painters use it. And it's as much protection as we're really going to need right now. So I'm going to pull off this. It's called a crush washer. So these you really should be replacing with every install or uninstall of the muzzle device on your rifle. These are considered a consumable item. As you torque the muzzle device down on top of it, it's called a crush washer because it crushes flat. It provides pressure against the muzzle device so that you can properly time it and without it coming off. I have seen some people use Loctite to try and do the same thing. Loctite is defeated by heat, so unless you plan to only shoot 1 or 2 rounds a day when you go to the range, you don't want to use Loctite. If you're going to use any kind of thread locker, there is a thread locker called Rockset, and it is defeated by water. It is very heat resistant. Going back to the crush washers, this is a different, newer one. I'm just going to fit this on, make sure that I grab the right one. This is a 1/2 by 28 thread barrel, and so is the new Faxon barrel, or well, new faction barrel. So we just want to make sure that all of our parts are made for the right other parts that we're using. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to pull off the gas block, and that is a series of punch pins. So we have the one at the top that is holding the gas tube in place, as well as the two at the bottom that are indexing the gas block onto the barrel. And I'm going to do that with, I'll start with a small hammer, and then if we need to, we'll move up to the larger hammer and some roll pin punches. Yep. Alrighty. Some people like to hold on to the roll pins for their various bits and bobs. If you ever lose them, they are dirt cheap, and they usually come in pretty standard sizes. Go on Amazon, buy them, they're cheap. If you're going to work on guns a lot, I would suggest, like we have back here, buying a set of roll pins. You can get a full set of all the various sizes that you might need. Like I said, on Amazon, they are not necessarily a consumable, but by nature, a roll pin is going to be a lot less durable. You can't really use it as many times as a solid steel pin. That is not to say that you can't reuse them. A lot of guns use roll pins for fitment purposes because they expand slightly because of the nature of them being spring steel that is rolled up on top of itself, as opposed to a solid steel pin where every time you send that pin through, it's going to shave off a little bit more metal, and eventually you're going to have to replace them anyways. The moral of the story is, pins are not necessarily consumable, but it's a good idea if you're going to work on your guns a lot to have a bunch handy. So we'll go ahead and try to knock out the roll pins on the bottom. I will get that momentarily. As I was saying, these are the two roll pins that are holding the gas block on. I doubt that you can see it on the camera because we're so far away, but I doubt that you can see it on the camera because we're so far away, but I doubt that you can see it on the camera. They are hollow on the inside because it is a piece of spring steel that is rolled around itself, or multiple depending on what kind of roll pins or what manufacturer you get the roll pins from. You can do this if you have an AR tool like this, or if you want, you can just use a bench block like this, or something to support the barrel as you're smacking away at it. Now, we're going to see if we can't just pull off the gas block, and I didn't think that we would be able to, so we're going to have to hit it with a hammer. But that's fine. That's what I have punches for. I'm going to start with a plastic punch and see if that'll do it. You want to be very careful because the gas tube, if you're going to reuse it, is a steel, most of the time, thin tube. It crushes very easily, so you don't want to put too much pressure or torque it too much because that will lead to some bad times. It's not moving. I guess we're going to steel punches. If there is like a major dent in it, you shouldn't run it. These gas tubes are not very wide in diameter, so I will pull this one off and show you. You can't really see it, but obviously the hole in the tube has to be smaller than the full diameter of the metal, and this is a pretty small tube to begin with, so what you don't want is any kind of blockages in your gas tube. What that'll do is it'll lead to issues with the gun cycling, because on an AR-15 platform, the gas traveling down the barrel and up the gas block and tube is what cycles the bolt. That is what we call a direct impingement system. So we're just going to keep hammering away, trying to make sure we can get this gas block off. Actually, you know what? We're going to take it off the MERS tool. We're going to try this. Yep, it's already starting to slide off. A lot of the times, anything that you're working with that is coming in contact with the propellant gases in a firearm are going to be what we call carbon locked. The carbon that is a byproduct of the combustion that creates the explosion that sends the bullet downrange likes to stick to stuff. Really likes to stick to metal. And it's small and it fills every gap. And so if things aren't working correctly, look for carbon. If you see a bunch of carbon sticking around the parts that usually have a lot of gas, you might have an issue with carbon lock, or there just might be too much debris because the carbon can bunch up and crystallize, or not necessarily crystallize, but get stiff enough and compacted enough to block gas from flowing. All right, we have come free. So we're just going to go ahead and remove the old gas tube. We're no longer using this. As you can see, it is much shorter in length than the new one because this old gas tube is a carbine length or mid-length. Can't remember off the top of my head. But with a shorter barrel, you have a shorter gas system. You can't put a gas block where there isn't a barrel, right? So if you only have 16 inches of barrel to work with, then most manufacturers will go on the safer side and set it as a shorter gas length system. Most rifles from the factory are what we call overgassed, which means that they have slightly too short of a system, which makes the ejection a little bit more violent. But because there's hundreds, if not thousands of manufacturers for ammunition out there, and because a lot of these companies are cranking out thousands and thousands of these guns, you want to make sure that whatever you sell will work with just about anything you'll find. So an overgas system will still run. It'll be more violent, it won't be as nice to shoot, but it will still run, as opposed to an undergas system, which won't run correctly or at all. We are moving to the longer rifle length gas and rifle length barrel because it's simply slightly more accurate. It gives it a little bit more time for that bullet to stabilize as it's flying down the barrel. With a longer gas system, you have a much smoother recoil impulse. Alrighty. Now, we're going to move on to removing the barrel nut. In this case, this one is, I think, a Foxtrot mic specific one. There's a lot of companies out there that make barrel nuts like this. A lot of companies that make rails, say Geisley or Knight's Armament or all these other big companies that you see in video games and stuff, they will have a barrel nut that is specific to their rail. And the reason for that is because a lot of these barrel nuts are used to clamp the rail down to the rifle. This is what we call a free float rail because it's only supported at the barrel nut. And as you can see, there are these two journals on the barrel nut. Those two screws that I took out of the rail slide into those two journals, and that's how the rail sits on the barrel nut without moving. The barrel nut has a specific torque spec. There is a mil spec for this piece. I'm going to go ahead and cover the barrel nut with some tape so that we don't scratch it. We're not going to really see it, so it's not that big of a deal. If you see your barrel nut a lot, you should probably go buy yourself a rail or a new rail, because there's usually a rail or rail piece covering it. And if there isn't, like I said, I want to go buy a new one. Technically, if you want to talk semantics, there is technically ways that you can secure a handguard to a rifle without using, especially for a free flow handguard, right, which is what we're using right now. There's technically ways to secure it while showing most of or part of the barrel nut. But the biggest problem with that is, as you can see, this rail has, well, a pick rail on the top. That lines up with the pick rail on the top receiver. If you have a gap there, it's harder to line it up. So unless you're really into the canted foregrip game without having canted slots, you want everything to line up correctly. And, you know, you might see the barrel nut through the rail, but for the most part, you want to have a lot of surface area covering the barrel nut on the rail, because that will just make it a little bit easier to clamp on and have a nice, steady, sturdy connection. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that that tape is on. Now we are going to start pulling off this barrel nut. A little physics for everybody here. Right hand rule, if you curl your fingers in the direction that you were turning a wrench, it'll tell you which direction it's going to go. So if I curl forward, my thumb is pointed to the left. Well, my left, your right. In this case, if I move the wrench up, it'll push out. This works for regularly threaded, non-counter threaded, or reverse threaded screws, bolts, barrel nuts. So if you have to do the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, this is easier because it gives you a visual. Just gotta loosen the crescent, and our barrel nut is off. Now that we have the barrel nut off, all we have to do is somehow remove the barrel from the upper receiver. We are going to just try pulling on it while holding the upper receiver. Depending on the manufacturer, depending on the specs that the barrel is cut to, sometimes you'll have a very, very tight fit, and sometimes you'll have a much less tight fit. So we're just going to give it a little yank and see if it comes out. Hey, look at that. Alrighty. So, just going to clean that off a little bit. This is a 16-inch Foxtrot mic barrel. It has a lot of molybdenum grease on it. The military spec is to use molybdenum when you are inserting or replacing a barrel. It helps just make sure that you don't have any binding on initial install, so that once you start torquing down the barrel nut, you're not going to get any weird over torque issues or anything, and the barrel's going to be seated correctly. You want to make sure that there is a lug on the top of the barrel. You will know what the top of the barrel is by that lug. And that's important because, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see, but the chamber on an Aero-15 barrel is actually directional. There is 2 feed ramps at the bottom of the star chamber. That's what guides the bullets into the chamber so that the bolt can push forward and lock into place. If you have that wrong, your gun's gonna jam because the bullets aren't gonna make it into the chamber. So we'll go ahead and put this down. This will be a good chance to unbox this too. So we're gonna pull off all of this protective stuff from shipping. Like I said in the other video, a lot of barrels ship with thread protectors. These threads, not fun if you mess them up. It is usually a machining job, and machining time can be expensive. So you want to make sure that you are protecting your threads there, as well as the barrel extension at the end of the barrel. So this is the new Faxon gunner profile barrel. We're going to try and get them side by side. So as you can see, we have about 4 more inches of barrel on the Faxon. You can also tell that the old Foxtrot mic barrel is a little bit thicker of a profile once you move past the gas block. The new Faxon barrel, the nice thing about their gunner profile barrel is that you have a lot of heat going up to the gas block, which is where a lot of the heat is going to sit on an AR-15 barrel because that gas is pushing that projectile out of the barrel. But then it cuts down pretty nicely towards the end of the barrel, which means that you have a little bit less weight at the end of the barrel, right? Any amount of weight at the end of a rod we call a lever. And a lever will impart torque on whatever is at the other end of the lever. Holding this barrel out now, imagine that this is connected to the rest of the upper receiver and the gun. With less weight at the end, it means that it's not pulling my hand down nearly as much as there would be if there was more weight at the end, i.e. more barrel, right? On a lot of traditional AR-15/M4, M16s, you see what's called a government profile. It was a lot of people not understanding a problem correctly and then trying to fix it, and then the government realizing, we already tried a bunch of fixes to this, we're just gonna keep it as is. Turns out, it's a burp. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you should definitely look up why the government profile exists. It's a fun story. But we'll go ahead and make sure that the inside of the upper receiver is clean. We don't want to have any grease or anything there that we didn't apply. We just want to make sure that it's as clean out as it's going to get. And what this is a gunk blaster. Think of it like super strong alcohol. It just clears things out. I'm going to use a little bit of this just to make sure that the threads are completely uncoated before I put more molybdenum on them. With any kind of cleaning agent like this, you want to make sure that you're wiping things down really nicely afterwards, because a lot of our guns are painted or coated. This is meant to take off stuff, anything, right? If it was not bare metal, chemical agents like this are really good at wearing them down, and you don't want to have premature wear on your metal components or your coated components. Alrighty, we're going to do a little bit of a test fit to see how much of a pain in the butt this is going to be. Not at all. Sweet. It makes my life easier. So, what we can do is we can go ahead and install this back onto the MRS tool. So, we had to take a quick break there because the Foxtrot mic gas block is held on by those 2 roll pins that I pointed out earlier. The way that it does that is by having 2 indexing cuts on the barrel. On the Faxon, those don't exist. So we had to fairly carefully drill and tap 2 new holes that we're going to set some grub screws into. They're a little small, so the camera won't probably pick them up. But you can see a little flash of silver. Those are our 2 new grub screws, and we're going to use those to attach the gas block. The holes are right there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of Molly on the barrel extension right here. Just helps keep it nice and slick so that we can insert it. And per mil spec, we also put Molly on the threads that the barrel nut sits on, as well as I might put a little bit on the barrel nut itself. Depends on how well and smoothly it goes on. But a little bit of molybdenum goes a long way. So we're just going to put a little bit on there to make sure that everything is nice and lubed up. So we're going to go ahead and install the barrel. This one is a nice fit. Alrighty. We've got that nice and mated on there. And now we're going to go ahead and put that barrel nut back on. The military spec for the torque on a barrel nut is 45 foot-pounds. Most gunsmiths will tell you that a nice Guten tight will work fine, especially for lower power cartridges like 223, 556. You want to make sure that after you torque it on though, you check every few hundred rounds just to make sure that your barrel nut's not coming loose. So we're going to go ahead and we've hand tightened it. We're going to go ahead and torque this barrel nut back on. Comparing a Guten type to 45 foot-pounds, it's about the same. Realistically, anything past 30 foot-pounds should hold it on fine. Like I said, 223, 556 are relatively low power cartridges. If you're doing this on something like an AR-10, you might want to check the actual torque spec and torque to spec. But if, you know, a bunch of armorers out in the field in Iraq can figure out how to keep a barrel on an AR platform, I'm sure that a Guten type barrel will work perfectly fine for someone who's just going to the range. Alrighty. She ain't going nowhere. Oh, excuse me. She ain't going nowhere. After we get that on, we're going to go ahead and check the length on the gas tube. We look like we are good there. So we're going to go ahead and get the gas block reinstalled. So the gas block connects to the end of the gas tube, siphons off gas from the barrel, and that's how your direct impingement gas system works. If you don't know which way it goes, real easy to tell. One side has a hole for the gas tube, the other one doesn't. Some gas blocks will have a through hole, and the gas tube itself is usually stopped at the end. It just depends on the manufacturer and what gas block you went with. So we'll go ahead and slide that on. Now, you want to make sure the gas tube is not a straight tube. There is a bend in it. So you want to make sure that the bend follows the profile of the barrel. In this case it does. It rises up over the barrel nut and then inserts into the upper receiver. We're going to go ahead and, using my little punch block here, put in the new roll pin that's going to keep this gas tube in place. Let's see if I can find something to support it. And there is a hole, let's see if I can show you that. There's a hole at the end of the gas tube that the roll pin will sit through. So I'm going to insert, try and find that hole. My Real Avid punch kit has a little pin holder, which is super nice. I'm going to go ahead and use that. Ooh, or not, because this isn't connected to anything and wants to turn. We're going to use the roll pin punch to try and get that seated. For a lot of people, they don't have all of these specific tools, even things like roll pin punches, because roll pins, you don't see them too often in applications where you're going to have to disassemble things. So sometimes you want to just send it with the hammer first. And while you run the risk of deforming the roll pin for something that's not taking a whole lot of force, it usually doesn't matter too much. I'm just going to remove the gas tube, seat the roll pin first, see if that works a little bit better. This roll pin's a little bit bigger than the hole that it's supposed to go into, which is generally what you want, but that can cause some problems with getting the roll pin into the gas block. Or it might be that this roll pin is a little too big for the gas block, and I'm just going to have to use the old one. We'll see if the old one does any better. It is already seating, so it is absolutely doing better. We're going to roll with that. This is annoying. Now you guys get to see how annoying this can be. Alrighty, go ahead and install the gas tube. Alrighty, gas tube is installed, roll pin is in. We had to use the old one. The new one that came with the gas tube is a little too big, and I'm not trying to force anything. So if we slide the gas block on, and by slide I mean hit with a hammer because it's real tight, and so we're going to have to do a little bit of work there to get that on. Use the brass face, try and get that where it needs to go. Big thing is just lining up that hole. Some people do the order of operations a little bit differently, but I like doing it this way because it means I don't have to take stuff apart later. Because obviously, if you already put your gas block on, you can't put the gas tube and just phase it into the block. Some people won't pin the gas tube until they've done the gas block, so they'll slide the gas tube in and have it sit inside of the upper receiver. You can absolutely do that. I like having everything mostly together by the time I get to this point, so let's see. Where's that big punch hole using? Might not even need the grub screws, they're so tight. Check alignment real quick. The first tool that I got everything lined up, and now I can put a little bit of oomph into it and try and put a little bit more oomph into it. This feels so wrong. Let's go this way. is to push up on the shoulder to be properly aligned. That is one of the only standardized things about like gas blocks. We're just gonna knock it to the left a little bit. I don't want to hit it too hard. I don't want to transfer too much shock to it, so I'm gonna try and hit it with the plastic. Alright, looks like the gas block is on. Really, the easiest way to find out if it's on right is shoot it. So whenever we next shoot this thing, we will check and make sure. I'm going to pull this off the MRS tool so that I can find the line that my tape is on, because I forgot to take my tape off. I mean, it's tape, and it's masking tape at that, so it's not that bad. Ooh, that was a belt. It's a good thing it wasn't a little bit lower. My voice would be a lot higher right now. It's a good thing this is masking tape and not something a lot more annoying to take off, like duct tape, which technically would work, but masking tape's easier to remove. It's paper tape with a low adhesive strength that you can use to not mark what you're working on, and you can remove easily and cleanly. Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and I need to turn this over and put in those grub screws, so I'll go ahead and do that. If you guys get a time lapse of me struggling with putting this on, then you'll probably realize that we don't really need these grub screws because it's so stuck on there. But better safe than sorry. Kind of impromptu Torx bit isn't really working, so I'm going to grab a Allen key. That's too big. An Allen key to give it the last bit of torque it needs to. It's still too big. Sit down. I'm slinging Allen keys everywhere. I want to make sure it's torqued down nice and tight, but I also don't want to accidentally strip it out. Alright, that should be good. There's a little bit of protrusion. We'll check that with the rail here in a bit, just to make sure that everything's good on that. Actually, I can go ahead and check that right now, just to make sure. Looks like we are good to go. Since the rail's already on there, we got a little bit more clearance because we have a longer barrel. I'll go ahead and do the rail section next, so that we're not having to worry about that. Got that same T27. If you guys don't have a good bracket screwdriver, it will make your life so much easier. Looks good to go. Alrighty, so we're going to take the crush washer for the last part, install the muzzle brake. So we're going to put the crush washer on first, and then we're going to hand tighten the muzzle brake, or technically compensator. Alrighty, so I'm going to have to take this off to show this part. Compensators and muzzle brakes will a lot of the times be set in such a way that the gas is expelled outwards and upwards. On this particular, I guess you would call this a compensator, you can see that you have it at the 2 o'clock and the 11 o'clock positions, and that will force the muzzle down as you shoot, which should make it a little bit easier to keep the rifle on target when you're shooting, especially unsupported. 223 and 556 is not a very hard round to control, but why suffer if you don't have to? I'm going to put more of this same lovely masking tape on muzzle brake / compensator, because depending on who you talk to, the definitions change for what's what. Alright, so we're going to turn this until the ports that are here and here are pointed upwards at the 2 and 11. I'm going to have to undo this. We're now running into an issue of timing. So this crush washer, in the way that it's timed, doesn't want to let go, or doesn't want to let the muzzle brake go as far as it needs to, so that we can get the correct timing on this muzzle device. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check something. If it's correct, if it's all the way set, then here's one set of holes and here's the other set. So we need to back it off by that much. Alrighty. So if you don't want to use a crush washer, what you can do is use shims. I didn't grab enough shims, so I have to go dig for more, but they're these tiny thin little pieces of metal that sit between your muzzle device and your barrel, and the whole point of them is to make sure that the timing on your muzzle device is correct. Before I do that, I am going to try a different crush washer, as different manufacturers make their crush washers differently, and the specs and thickness of them differ slightly. We'll try a different crush washer just to see if we really need to do the shims on this. Problem is that the crush washer that we were using is not giving us good timing, not without having to really torque the muzzle device down, which you don't want to have to over torque your muzzle device. It's almost a full rotation. That's going to be real rough to get done. Try one last one. Okay, that's fine. That'll work. Let's check fitment. Let's check timing. Just gotta come a little bit further down. we're good. Now we can find where I put that dang line on the tape so that I can go ahead and just peel it off. And we get to sit here and watch the montage of me peeling my tape again. It's the only bad thing about using masking tape is having to actually take it off. Alright, check timing on that. It is slightly over time. We're gonna knock it back by a couple of degrees. I have a rag here that we'll use instead of having to bust out more tape and then remove more tape. Alright, there we go. So, once it's properly timed, you can see on the top of the muzzle device, the ports that the gas is going to be coming out of are pointed upwards and outwards, and that'll help center the rifle and keep it from rising up too much as you're shooting. And the last thing to do is reassemble, pop it back onto the SRU lower that we have, or bullpup kit, acts as a lower. Find that hole, and use punch to try and hold down this guide spring rod, which I'm going to have to take out because I have to dump that. Alrighty. I'm going to use a little bit of Molly lube on the internals. This is a spray-on Molly lube from Birchwood Casey. Found it on Amazon, but works pretty good. I'm just going to use a little bit on some of the mating surfaces inside of the rifle's upper. Just make sure everything's moving the way that it should. Alrighty, we are good to go. This is just a brass deflector and cheek pad that you can get with your SRU kit. It just makes it a little bit easier to not accidentally catch the brass in the face, because this is a bullpup and everything is happening right next to your face. It's a little rough, but it is just a snap-on accessory. Now to reassemble the bullpup kit. It has a front and rear pin on the lower, just like a regular lower, because it is a regular lower. There's also a pin that goes right here that holds the front. You can see here there's an M-LOK section of Picatinny rail that has a little lug on it. That is how you attach and hold the front of the rail, or the mid of the rail, to the front of the bullpup kit. So it slides on just like any other AR. Probably help if I didn't accidentally depress the pins while I was trying to put the kit down. Pins in the rear connect the front and rear of the upper and lower receiver together, and then this one pin with a detent in it goes into the front. I have a soft popper, make sure it's nice and tight, and then there we go. This is a Foxtrot mic FM15 upper, forward charging, bufferless, sitting on a, let's see, that is an Aero M4E1 lower inside of an SRU bullpup kit. It now has a 20-inch barrel. I think that looks pretty good myself. Let's see if we can get it shouldered. As you can see, everything's still nice and tight. Feels pretty good. There's not a whole lot of weight at the end of the rifle, which means that there shouldn't be too much leveraging on it as we're shooting. And the overall length of the gun is still nice and short, as opposed to a traditional AR with a 20-inch barrel. So in my left hand on your right side, you will see the bullpup, and this is with a 20-inch barrel. In my right hand, your left side, is a traditional AR with a 16-inch barrel. I'd say that's about 3 inches of difference. You get 4 extra inches of barrel with a longer gas system that's going to be a little smoother to shoot, and you save 4 inches on the overall length of the gun. As far as bullpups go, the biggest concern that most people have is that because there's not a direct link between your trigger mechanism and the sear in the gun anymore, it uses linkage bars to depress. In this case, on this particular kit, you have a traditional trigger installed in the lower, and then it uses a linkage bar connected to the bullpup kit's trigger, and that's how you actuate the trigger. So what a lot of people are concerned about is that that can make the trigger feel pretty mushy. If you get a kit with a good linkage bar, or any kind of bullpup with a good linkage bar that doesn't flex a whole lot as it's transferring energy to the trigger mechanism, or in this kit case, the traditional trigger that is installed back there on the lower receiver, then you get a lot better trigger pull than you would if it has a sloppy linkage bar that has a lot of play. And a lot of people are happy with mil-spec triggers anyways. They're not super nice to begin with. You know, there's aftermarket triggers all over the place that can improve the feel of your gun. In this particular SRU kit, you can still upgrade the stock trigger that comes with whatever lower that you decided to buy, or that you bought separately from the lower, with a nicer aftermarket trigger that should tighten up a lot of that slop. And the SRU kit also has some tuning that you can do with the trigger bar to make sure that that engagement is nice and tight. But yeah, So we're going to next time replace this barrel on, this is just a Smith & Wesson bog standard AR, but we're going to replace the barrel on this Smith & Wesson with a 20-inch barrel, and we will see just how much longer it gets. The stock AUG, doesn't really matter which platform AUG, A1, A2, A3 that you buy, is about this long. Comes stock with a 20-inch barrel. You can get the shorter barrel versions for more CQB focused minded people, but it's about this long. Like the bullpup conversion on any AR really shortens the length. It's crazy. And it's also kind of funny to see just the little pencil barrel sticking out, but that'll help with not holding on to as much heat too. The thinner profile a barrel has, the quicker it heats up, but also the quicker it cools down. There's less metal there to hold on to heat. So many more short, quick bursts. The bursts are closer together. We'll go with that, right? Can't really hold up to sustained fire that well, but as long as you give it a little bit of time to cool off, you shouldn't see any problems with the groups. Yeah, so this has been replacing the barrel on this SRU Bullpup Kit AR. My name is Bao Ha. I am working at Rcvr Armory in downtown Mebane. We're right across the parking lot from the bowling alley. If anyone lives around here, we'll be happy to help you with anything that you got that you might want to get fixed or customized. So that's all I got.